Joint. Joint is the articulation between two bones. Here we see, here is a bone, this is the humerus and this is the scapula. These two bones articulate in this part of the body. So this part will be a joint, and this is named as the shoulder joint. This is the posterior view of the joint. This is the shoulder joint. In the radiology, in the X-ray, we can see here is the head of the humerus and this is the scapula. So these two bones meet here and this is the joint and this is the shoulder joint. If we see very close this joint, we can see that this joint, in the joint, this is the humerus and this is the scapula, and this is the glenoid cavity of the scapula. So on a close examination, we see that the head of the humerus is covered with a cartilage, and the cavity, glenoid cavity, also covered with the cartilage. In between these two cartilages, there is a space, fluid-filled space. This is a form of the joint. And sometimes we see this type of joint. Here is a vertebra and here is another vertebra. In between two vertebrae there is the cartilage. So this is another form of joint. And sometimes we see in this skull there is a bone and there is another bone. In between there is the fibrous type of tissue. It is a fibrous type of tissue. So this is the fibrous joint, this is the cartilaginous joint, and this is the synovial joint. For studying the joints of the upper limb, first of all we want to go detail about the synovial joint. The synovial joint, in the synovial joint, the two bones meet with each other, and the articular, this part of the bone that meets with each other, this is known as the articular part of the bone. This articular part of the bone is covered with cartilage. Number one characteristic of the synovial joint. And second thing is that in between these two cartilages there are fluid. This is known as the synovial fluid. And this synovial joint has also the synovial membrane. Here here we see this is there is a membrane that surrounds the here you can see that surrounds the joint. This is the synovial membrane, and outside the synovial membrane, there is the fibrous tissue that covers the joint. So this is known as the fibrous capsule. And this joint is also supported by some ligaments. This is the so in close-up view we can see this is the synovial. This is the synovial membrane. This is the capsule. This is the joint capsule, and it has some ligaments along with this capsule and outside the capsule. This is the parts of a synovial joint. There are different forms of synovial joints. The name of the synovial joints are according to the shape of the bone. Here we see this head of the humerus is look like a ball, and the glenoid cavity looks like a socket. So this is a ball and socket variety of synovial joint. Here is the sternum, here is the clavicle. The end of this clavicle and this end of the sternum, these are plain. So this sternoclavicular joint is plain variety of synovial joint. Here we see, here is the lower end of the humerus, and this is the olecranon process of the ulna, and this is the trochlear notch. So here we see this joint between the ulna, humerus, and the radius. This joint remains in this position, and when it flexes, it goes this position. This type of the joint is known as the hinge variety of synovial joint. Now we can see there is the lower end of the radius, and here is the carpal bones. So this joint is the wrist joint, and the shape of this joint is ellipse, so it is known as the ellipsoid joint. And here we see another joint in between the carpal and the metacarpal bone. So this joint is look like the saddle of the horse. So this is the saddle joint, carpo metacarpal joint. And here we see there is the joint in between the this is the metacarpal bone, this is the proximal phalanx. In between this there is a joint, and this joint moves in two directions. Here we see this joint can move like this. This is the metacarpal, this is the phalanx. So it can flex like this, and it can also move this direction. So it has a movement in this direction like this, flexion, and this direction, and this is known as the condylar joint. This is the condylar joint. And another form of the synovial joint is the here is the second vertebra, there is the axis, and this is the first vertebra, is the atlas. So the this odontoid process of the axis, it passes through this bone, atlas, and this type of the joint is known as the pivot. It can rotate around this pivot. So this is the pivot variety of synovial joint. This is all about the synovial joint. Now we will learn on by another joint of the upper limb.